Welcome back. In the previous session we were discussing about the lesson tissues. We know that plants have two types of tissues, meristematic tissues and permanent tissues. In the previous session we have discussed about meristematic tissues whose function is to divide, and they are responsible for growth of the plant, both primary growth as well as secondary growth. The second type of tissue is permanent tissues. The question is, if the growth of the plant is due to meristematic tissues, then from where do permanent tissues originate? The answer is very simple. When the meristematic tissues, they acquire a specific structure and a specific function, they themselves become permanent tissues. Meaning, permanent tissues are the product of meristematic tissues. This process of transformation of a meristematic tissue into a permanent tissue is called as differentiation. They become different from the meristematic tissues. How? They have a specific shape which meristematic cells do not have, and they have a specific role to play, meaning they have a specific function. Meristematic tissue does not have any function. It keeps on dividing. And another important point is permanent tissues. The cells, they cannot divide. Cells do not divide, because division is the function of meristematic tissue. So these are the general properties of permanent tissues. We can classify the permanent tissue into two types: simple permanent tissue and complex permanent tissue. This is called simple permanent tissue because these tissues are made up of only one type of cells. Only one type of cells. For example, tissue is a group of cells. In simple permanent tissue, all the cells are of same type. So all are spherical. The complex tissue is made up of different types, more than one type of cells. Xylem tissue and phloem tissue. Xylem and phloem, about which you have already heard. Let us start the discussion with simple permanent tissue, and then we can talk about complex tissue. So there are three types of simple permanent tissue. What we will be doing is, we will take one tissue and then we will discuss in which part of the plant do we find this type of tissue, and what do the cells look like, and what is the role of this tissue in the plant. Very simple. Simple permanent tissue is further divided into three types. The first type of simple permanent tissue is what is called as parenchyma tissue. Parenchyma tissues are found almost everywhere in the plants, in the root, in the stem, in the leaf, in the flowers, etc. So parenchyma tissues are filling tissues. Wherever space needs to be filled, these parenchyma cells are present. So the parenchyma cells are usually spherical or hexagonal in shape, and they are closely packed. But important feature of parenchyma cells is that, as you can see in the diagram, they have spaces between the cells called as intercellular spaces. This is one very important identification feature, and they have thin cell wall. Cell wall is thin and it is uniform. The thickness is uniform everywhere. Now, what is the function of this parenchyma tissue? The function of parenchyma tissue is storage. It stores food. So, parenchyma tissue is a storage tissue. Where is it present? It is present in the leaf, in the stem, and in the root. Wherever storage is required, there you find parenchyma tissue. So, if the parenchyma tissue contains chloroplasts and it contains the chlorophyll pigment, we call such kind of parenchyma as chlorenchyma. So, their main function is to undergo photosynthesis and prepare the food. In certain aquatic plants that grow underwater or on water, the parenchyma tissue, it contains air cavities. This will help the plants to float on water due to the air cavities. Such a type of parenchyma tissue is called as aerenchyma. That is about the first type of simple permanent tissue. The second type of simple permanent tissue is collenchyma tissue. This collenchyma tissue is responsible for flexibility of the plants. It makes the plant parts flexible. For example, we can see the stems bending without breaking. This is because of collenchyma tissue. The leaves will flutter in air. That is because of the collenchyma tissue present in the stalk of the leaf. So, we find collenchyma tissue on the stems, which will help them in bending and also in leaf stalk. So, they provide flexibility and they also provide mechanical support to the plants. Strength as well as flexibility. That is your collenchyma tissue. If you take a section of the collenchyma tissue and observe under the microscope, we find that collenchyma tissue, the cells are usually hexagonal in shape, and the spaces between the cells is very less when compared to parenchyma tissue. In parenchyma tissue, intercellular spaces are more, whereas here the intercellular spaces are less. That is number one. Very important, the cell wall thickenings are non-uniform. In the case of parenchyma, the cell wall was thin and it was uniform everywhere, whereas here the cell walls are thick at the corners. So, non-uniform cell wall thickenings is a common feature. This is what we can use to identify the tissues, and these are living tissues, of course. Even parenchyma is living tissue. It is about our collenchyma. The third type of simple permanent tissue is called as sclerenchyma. It is a dead tissue. its main function is only mechanical support. It provides strength to the plants. Usually we find sclerenchyma in older parts of the plants. It is found in the coconut husk. You see the fibers. The fibers are nothing but sclerenchyma tissue. What is the function of the fibers? To provide strength and support. So we find it in the seed coat, outermost covering of the seed. It is found near the xylem and phloem. Wherever xylem and phloem are present, it is present near them. If you observe the sclerenchyma cells under microscope, we find that the cells are very closely packed and intercellular spaces are completely absent. There are no spaces at all. And not only that, the cell walls are very thick. The cell walls are so thick that the space inside the sclerenchyma cell is very less. Intercellular spaces are completely absent and space inside the cell is very less. These cell walls, they are thickened with the help of a substance called as lignin. So it's a type of chemical. So they have lignified cell walls which are very thick, and these are dead tissues. Their main function is to provide mechanical support. Now, because of this, parenchyma is called as the storage tissue because it stores substances. Collenchyma, it provides mechanical support, therefore it is called as living mechanical tissue. Whereas sclerenchyma, it provides support but it is dead, therefore sclerenchyma is called as dead mechanical tissue. That is about the three types of simple permanent tissues: parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma. If you look at the diagram, when we take a section of a stem, root or leaf, we find that the outermost covering of the stem, leaf or root is made up of a single layer of cells. This outermost covering, which is present everywhere in the plant body, outside the stem, outside the leaf, on the upper surface as well as the lower surface, and as outer covering in roots, is called as the epidermis. So epidermal layer of cells are present in the plants. Because they are present on the outermost surface of the plants, their main function is protection. This will protect the plants against harsh environmental conditions. They will also protect the plants against any microbial or pathogenic attack. So it is protective in function. In certain plants, the epidermal cells, they also produce certain waxy substances which will help them from excessive water loss. For example, in desert plants, the outside the epidermal covering, there is a layer of waxy cover called as cuticle. This will protect the plant from water loss. Not only that, in the case of roots, we know that the main function of root is absorption of water and minerals. So in the case of roots, the outermost epidermal cells, sometimes they are also modified into hair-like structures called as root hairs. These root hairs will increase the surface area for absorption of water and nutrients. The epidermal cells are modified into root hairs. In the epidermis, we find certain pores. In the epidermal layer, certain pores are found. These are nothing but the stomata, about which you have studied in class 7. So the epidermal cells, so if you take a section of the epidermis, we find that the pore is surrounded by two kidney-shaped or bean-shaped structures. These are called as the guard cells, and this is the pore opening, and these kidney-shaped cells are surrounded by the epidermal cells. So this entire structure is called as the stomata, which is present on the outer surface of the leaf stems and sometimes in roots. The main function of stomata are, it is through this pore that plants' leaves absorb carbon dioxide. So it is required for exchange of gases. Carbon dioxide is taken in and oxygen is released out. So stomata helps in exchange of gases. Stomata also helps in removal of excess water, which is called as transpiration. If there is extra water in the leaves, the water is lost out through the stomatal pore, which is called as transpiration. So stomata plays a very important role in exchange of gases and transpiration. That is about the outermost covering in plants is epidermis. Let us now move on to the second type of permanent tissues, which are complex permanent tissues. As the name itself suggests, complex, they are made up of more than one type of cells. These are of different shapes, but they come together and perform the same function. Example, xylem tissue and phloem tissue. In plants, as you can see in the diagram, the xylem and phloem are often closely associated. They are present close to each other, either side by side or one above the other. The xylem tissue and phloem tissue may be separated by a thin strip of meristematic tissue called as the cambium, which is an example of lateral meristem. This cambium in the future will divide and is responsible for increase in diameter of the plant. The xylem tissue is mainly responsible for transportation of water and minerals. So we find this xylem tissue right from the roots. They are connected to the stem, and through the stem they reach the veins of the leaves. So this is required for transportation of water and minerals. The xylem tissue is made up of 4 different types of cells, namely tracheids, vessels, xylem parenchyma, xylem fibers. The tracheids and vessels are elongated tube-like cells. They have thick cell walls, and the cell walls are perforated, meaning they have pores everywhere. Pits are present. So these tracheids and vessels are one pipe connected to another pipe. The inner components are hollow. So they are tube-like structures, and these two mainly are responsible for transportation of water. Whereas the xylem parenchyma, it will store some amount of food because it is parenchyma tissue, as you have already seen. So it is storage tissue. The xylem fibers, they are meant for providing mechanical support and strength. So in this case, the brackets are dead tissue, vessels are dead cells, fibers are dead because fibers are made up of sclerenchyma, as you know, whereas the only living tissue in xylem is parenchyma, which is living. These are the four components of the xylem tissue. In the case of phloem, there are 5 types of cells. Phloem tissue is mainly for transportation of food. The food prepared by the leaves must be transported from the leaf to other parts of the plant, such as stem, roots, and some other older parts of the plant which cannot perform photosynthesis. So phloem tissue is a food conducting tissue. It is made up of 5 types of cells, namely sieve cells and sieve tubes, companion cells, as the name suggests, companion. These cells are present together with the sieve cells and sieve tubes. As you can see in the diagram, the sieve tubes are hollow, elongated cells. They do not contain nucleus. Nucleus is absent, very important. So, and besides the sieve tube, we can find rectangular cells called as companion cells. Other than this, we also find phloem parenchyma and phloem fibers. Fibers, once again, for providing strength and support. Parenchyma is storage tissue. It stores some of the starch, and these are mainly for transportation of the food, which are helped by the companion cells. In the case of phloem, the 4 cells are living, whereas only phloem fibers are dead. As I told you earlier, the xylem and phloem are often present very close to each other, and together xylem and phloem, we call them as vascular bundles. Vascular bundle because they are present together. Vascular means for transportation. That is, this is for transportation of water and this is for transportation of food. To quickly summarize the portion of plants, the growing regions of the plant, that is the tip of the shoot, tip of the root, and near the nodes and on the sides of the plants, we find meristematic tissues. They are responsible for the growth of the plant. They keep on dividing and they increase the length of the plant and increase the girth of the plant. The permanent tissues, they are derived from the meristematic tissues through a process called as differentiation. They have permanent shape and permanent function, and they do not divide, very important. Permanent tissues are simple permanent and complex permanent. In the next session, we will discuss about the tissues present in animals. Thank you.